Hello, my name is Jonah Mwokboko. Welcome to Talking Tech today. With me is Mr. Eghosa Omoigui, who is the founder and managing general partner of EchoVC Partners. Eghosa, good to have you today. Thank you for making time to join us. So we will be talking about investment in technology in Nigeria. You've been playing in this space for how long now?
Well, in Nigeria, 3 years.
Okay.
Officially, and then probably another 3 before that.
Okay. So, over the past 3 years, tech was actually booming or even becoming more prominent in Nigeria. And of course, the need for investment continues to increase. So, but I want you to also provide an assessment of the sector since you started playing.
Sure. So, thanks for having me.
Okay.
I run a seed, an early stage investing platform called EchoVC. So what we typically do is that we make investments in different buckets. We make a type of investment we call the pre-seed, which is usually about $50,000. And those are typically into founders and super early companies that we think are very interesting, may not have had what we in the industry call product market fit. So there are some early indications that this thing could be a really important product, but still very early. So we give those types of founders and companies a small amount of money, not just to provide significant encouragement to them, but also to be able to allow them to build out their teams and the technology to pursue the opportunities. And then the next stage would be what we call the seed deals, which are anywhere between $250,000 and $500,000. And those are companies that are a little bit further along. They have slightly more defined teams. They have a very clear product offering, and they also have a very clear market definition. And they match that product to that market, and you have very clear signs that there's stuff that's going on there. And so you're giving them more money now to be able to sort of, really go attack the opportunity. And then we have a third bucket, which we call C+, which is, about $1 million. And again, those are companies that are further along the cycle. So those are typically what we do. We invest in technology and technology-enabled products and services. We invest mostly in Nigeria, but we also cover sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay. So over the past 3 years, have you been able to find such companies to put money? Have you been able to find them? Do we have examples and such investments you've made?
Yes. So we've been, I think, very fortunate. So, a little bit of rewind. So I moved from the Valley to do this, and
from Silicon Valley, where everything is happening.
And I was there for about 15 years. And so the original plan was to set up a technology investing fund focused in sub-Saharan Africa, anchored out of Lagos. And so there was a process by which you go to raise money from other people, institutional investors, entities, corporations, and the like, to be able to invest in these types of small startup companies. So I started this process in 2011.
Okay.
And so it was going back and forth between San Francisco and Lagos, every sort of 8 weeks, and then became every 4 weeks. So the reason why I'm sharing this story is that a lot of people don't know the backdrop behind what happens before you actually have enough money to invest.
Okay.
And so in that period of time, you're learning the market, you're learning the entrepreneurs who will be interesting. And I think we're very fortunate. And so when we finally landed, we started investing. Of course, it wasn't immediate. We've been monitoring these entrepreneurs. And so we've invested in a variety of companies, Hotels.ng, Printivo, SMT Media, which people probably don't know better as AdBox, your screens at the fuel stations. And of course, the most recent one we announced was Cars 45.
Yeah. So over the last 2 years, say from the early 2016 or second quarter of 2016, Nigeria's economy slipped into recession. And of course, that affected the volume of economic activity generally in the country. So what about in your area? Has this recession affected volume of investment as well?
So I think the only thing that recessions never do is they never quell the optimism of entrepreneurs. And, I've done investments over several recessions and sort of the U.S. economic cycle. I've seen some really, really bad stuff. I was, with my prior job at Intel Capital, I was a part of a team that was essentially doing the restructuring and shutdown of companies in the post-March 2000 bust. And then I also was part of the team that saw the, Lehman bust. And these are ugly. But what's interesting is that consistently, the very best companies come out of those recessions, which must mean that entrepreneurs don't take those recessions as anything to go pack up and quit. So in our view, and I think just based on that experience, what we care about is entrepreneurs who are high quality conviction, high fidelity understanding of a customer, and a very, very clear sense of what the product is that this customer needs and or wants. And it doesn't really matter what happens in the macro. Now, that said, you don't completely disqualify the impacts of the macro, because eventually that trickles down. But
so when you say macro,
so when we talk about macro, we're talking about the larger effects, right? So, oil prices go down, the exchange rate volatility, which hurt everybody. So those are the kinds of long-run impact effects that, slow things down. And, but at the same time, because we are at the very early stages of company life cycles where we invest, it matters to us that the entrepreneurs have seen a problem that they want to go solve. And the other thing I will point out that we consistently have believed in my firm is that you have companies that are focused on microeconomies. So the macroeconomy is sort of Nigeria's economy and how it gets impacted by oil prices and how it gets impacted by sort of your larger fiscal policy and the like, and monetary policies. But what we like is microeconomies, where you're focusing on segments of the economy that continue, whether or not oil is at 30 or 80,
100.
Right? I mean, these are markets, as the CEO of Principal says, every day someone wants to print. It doesn't matter what the price of oil is. Every day someone wants to print. Same thing with the CEO of hotels at ING. Every day someone needs to spend a night in the hotel. So these are microeconomies. And I think one of the things that I really love about, Nigeria in particular, and so probably sub-Saharan Africa in general, is that a lot of these microeconomies are what we call internally iceberg microeconomies. So everyone knows that a typical iceberg has 90% of its total mass or more below the surface.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so a lot of these microeconomies in Nigeria and throughout the greater sub-Saharan Africa are very iceberg-like. Like you don't really see a lot of the mass until you dig deep. Right? And so I think for us, we think that yes, there was, there clearly was a slowdown that impacted everybody. Mm-hmm. The market is sort of stabilized now. It's I think very clear that once you sort of figure out, people don't like investors can price risk.
Okay.
What they cannot price is uncertainty. What they don't like is uncertainty. So when there's uncertainty, everybody runs, right? And so we stayed the course. We continued. It wasn't easy, but again, because we have as much conviction about the people, the quality of the people, the talent here, and as well as the markets, we didn't come just to quit.
Okay, but from what you have seen over the past 3 years in the technology investment landscape, has your perception changed in any way?
Well, I think that's a tough question. I think my perception, my belief when I first started was that this had incredible amounts of talent, this market did, and there would be a significant number of entrepreneurial opportunities. My perception hasn't changed very much. I think if there's one thing that I would probably point out is that the probably number of fundable entrepreneurs is a little smaller than I think I would have probably imagined.
Okay. So let's take that again.
Okay.
Before you came,
Yes.
you thought there were more viable businesses than
Correct.
you now see.
Correct.
After coming on.
That's correct.
So there is more opportunity for people with investable ideas.
Yes. But at the same time, there are not enough of those people to pursue all the opportunities. So it's a weird construct. So I'll give classic example is people ask, well, how many sort of fundable seed opportunities do you see? Now, remember, I run a venture capital fund.
Mm-hmm.
I go raise money from other people to deploy. My responsibility is to return that money in multiples, right? They're not giving it to me to just play, right? So it's my responsibility to make money on it. Right? And so for me to do that, I have to invest in quality companies that can become worth a lot of money and have a lot of impact. And usually those two things correlate in Nigeria and in Africa. If you do really well, you hire a lot more people, so there's a lot more impact. The challenge is I think there's just a smaller number of those types of entrepreneurs. Now there's a large number of people who can start small businesses, they do okay, right? But I don't invest in companies that plan to do okay. I invest only in companies that plan to do spectacular.
Okay.
So that number is a finite number.
Okay. So when you get into the business of investing, one of the trending issues in the ecosystem is the relationship between VCs and founders. VCs are accused of wanting to take everything.
Right.
So how do you look at this? What has been your experience?
Well, I think, I've invested in many different parts of the world, and I have seen predatory investing. It's not a problem that's sort of just unique to Nigeria or sub-Saharan Africa. But I think what really happens is that there's a misalignment of both understanding on the part of sort of the investor and the entrepreneur. That's sort of one leg. And then the other part of it is a misalignment in terms of sort of goals. So what you find with this issue is that when you see predatory investors, we were sitting down at a conference and someone said something about how an investor shows up and they want 70% of the company or 80% of the company,
Mm-hmm.
And I laugh because I'm like, that's not an investor, that's an employer, right? You're just getting hired, right? So as long as it's very clear, you guys have alignment about sort of those rules, no problem. But I think it is really short-sighted of investors who want to take of a lot of these companies. Our view, even before we started, was that it was important to think the long term. Okay. So on average, we estimate that a startup today will probably need to raise money probably 4 or 5 times.
Okay.
Right, to be able to hit escape velocity, where it becomes worth a lot of money. Right. Now, of course, there are a lot of things that have to go well and execute and so on and so on. But that said, if you sort of think about it, the way we did was, on average, every time you raise money, right, the founders of the company get diluted by a third. So let me explain that because it's a little bit more complicated. So if you start at 100%,
okay,
when you raise money with a reasonable person, not someone who's trying to employ you, someone who's trying to invest in you, you're typically selling about 30 or 35% of your company, right? So the founders end up with maybe 70%, somewhere around there. Then you raise money again, then they dilute down. So, because there's more people are buying more ownership, then your existing ownership comes down a little bit, right? So it has to shrink.
Yeah.
So you do that 4 or 5 times, right? And at the end of the day, maybe you own maybe 20 or 25%, but you own 25% of a company that may be worth $100 million. So,
and it's probably majority.
So you have kind of ended up in a good place, right? So your ownership may have shrunk, but the value of the ownership,
you now own,
yes, has grown. But if you start the other way around, where you only own 30, then by the time you have now gotten to the company to a stage where it's worth a lot of money, You might own 1%. And it makes no sense to us. Because at that point in time, it's very significant risk to the investor because the founder can just leave.
And it's not good for the business.
It's not good for the business because the truth of the matter is investors don't know how to run these businesses. Right? So what we did was we essentially had to create an artificial construct where even when the company was still not worth what they were trying to raise, the ways you can go about investing, putting the money in different tranches. But the goal is always at the beginning when we invest, the founders need to own almost a super majority of this company. It is super important.